What's up YouTube? Welcome to today's video, and today I'm gonna go over the Forbidden Sanctum and what my thoughts about it are. So I have done the Sanctum a fair bit. Now I haven't reached the last floor because I only recently started doing it because I was thinking of ways to get character power, and I just want a little bit of a diversity in my farming methods. So I was like, why not step into the Sanctum? And I did get a Sanctified Relic. Now this is probably the best Sanctified Relic for this build I could possibly have, besides the prefix. Even if I got like +1 frenzy charge, it wouldn't be better than Intimidate, and 27% increased armor is pretty good once I swap the build over to Brass Dome. So I am pretty satisfied with my choice of Sanctum. Now the problem is Sanctum is not bad for Venom Jar. A lot of people think Sanctum's really bad for Venom Jar, but it couldn't be further from the truth as long as you don't Whirling Blades on top of the boss. Now, there are some problems with Sanctum, and I do think that these problems are so fundamental to the league mechanic, and I don't really know how they can actually fix it without making the entire Sanctum just a complete joke. Now, first off, did they even test the league mechanic? Because this thing was the most annoying thing in the game. So this is pretty much the Sanctum thing, slurping you up, and as soon as you just go over the zone, you immediately get pulled in. So if you're doing like Legion, which is a time-sensitive thing, you get pulled into the Sanctum. It's like, what the heck? I need to kill the Legion. And it's something that's like non-consensual. The whole league mechanic just feels non-consensual to me. Leaves a kind of a bitter taste. Now, I'm just joking, of course, but that is what it feels like. I don't know how you could possibly play through the campaign or do some maps even once and not realize that the Sanctum shouldn't be designed like that, where it pulls you in immediately. And that is the first thing that set off some red flags for me, because how could you actually have the league mechanic like that at the start and not realize it? And that probably means the other areas of the league mechanic probably were not that tested. And lo and behold, that ended up being the case. Now, I did do the Sanctum to get the Sanctified Relic, and I do think at its core, Forbidden Sanctum is an amazing league mechanic. Super fun concept, has amazing potential, but it fails miserably because of poor testing and emphasizing the worst part about PoE, which is clear combat. Now, these are some posts. Now, these aren't like cherry-picked posts. These were like all over the top of Reddit. And Forbidden Sanctum basically makes the best aspect of the game irrelevant, which is gearing, while putting most of the focus on the worst aspect of PoE, telegraph attack / visual clarity. Now, this is not always true because in Searing Exarch, Eater of Worlds, those fights have great visual clarity. However, Forbidden Sanctum has really, really bad visual clarity. And in a game where you're trying to promote buying MTX as much as GGG has, a lot of the MTX you do spend your money on is actually a detriment to your survival in the game. And you honestly just cannot see some of the stuff. And not to mention, you get attacked by an auto attack, you could lose a bunch of resolve right away. And this is like someone saying god-awful league design, and this is more of the risk-reward factor. But Sanctum offers are just boring and uninspired. So some of the offers, like there's 3 different rewards you can get. One at the end of the, you can take it right now. You can wait until the end of the floor, or you can wait at the end of the Sanctum. And some of the stuff is just absolutely awful, where the reward at the end of the Sanctum is actually less than before. Now there's no way you could test it and not find out that the Sanctum offers at the end of the Sanctum are awful. Like, the whole pot of gold at the end of the run is just completely gone because the rewards are really just that awful. Now, did they even test the Sanctum? Now, like I mentioned before, the Sanctum realm is sometimes blocking your path on maps of like narrow layouts, and you just can't really get around it. It feels awful. Sometimes you're zooming and then you just walk into it or Whirling Blades into it. And completing the Sanctum rewards are awful risk to reward value. Here's one right here. 3 Chaos, 3 Chisels at the end of the floor, and 14 Chance Orbs. Like, I don't know if this is done on purpose to give us some variety in the rewards, but this is just absolutely awful. It feels terrible, and everyone's just going to take the 3 Chaos right away. Now, I could see an argument being made that they want you to have some instant gratification sometimes instead of delaying it all the time. Now, please stop pulling me into the Sanctum before I click on the orb. I don't want to do this league mechanic the way it is now. And sometimes you don't want to force people to do the league mechanic if they don't want to do it, right? You don't want to drag them into the Sanctum when they're just trying to make their way through the maps. Now, I do feel like that is a fundamental problem with Sanctum, is that a lot of times you are forced to do it. And now GG is going to force us to do it because we need to get the Sanctified Relic. It's really just that great. Now, This is the next problem, which is missing the idea of roguelikes. Now, I never really played a roguelike before, so I did some research into it, and I looked at how Hades and other games did it. And in these roguelikes, you actually get more powerful as you go throughout the, what's it called, your run. Now, PoE does it the exact opposite way, where you get weaker and weaker and weaker as you go. And that is pretty much because every single room a lot of times is blocked by rooms that give you an affliction when you complete it. So you can get all sorts of afflictions, and it's not very uncommon. I had like 8 afflictions and 2 boons at one time. And these afflictions, a lot of them are literally run ending. You can get, what's it called? Room types are unknown in Sanctum, rewards are unknown in Sanctum, 100% more resolve lost. I mean, these people don't even have some of the really bad ones, which is increased trap speed or reduced movement speed. Like some of the ones are absolutely crazy, 40% reduced movement speed or something like that. Now, this is someone who actually got a run that was finished because he was lucky enough to get a boon that makes it so that he ignores the afflictions that he picks up. So this is why this guy was able to complete it. And you can see this is what the Sanctum should be like. We should be getting a bunch of buffs instead of making us a super, super weak character. Now, I don't know what kind of sick fantasy they have going on with the roguelikes, but their way of doing the roguelikes literally inspires people not to want to play further into the Sanctum because your character is literally getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Now, the core tenet of roguelikes is that you get stronger and stronger and stronger throughout the floor. So I feel like this whole design thing has been fatally flawed. Now, this is actually an easy change because you can just make the rooms more skewed towards buffs. You can lower some of the debuff downside. So I could definitely think that this is something they could end up fixing. Now, the core problem is something I don't think they could end up fixing, and this is that Path of Exile has very, very, very bad visual clarity and hit feedback. We literally cannot really tell what is going on sometimes. Now, we can actually see here, I think there are some posts on Reddit going on about how this league mechanic actually works. And in the end, it's just very, very difficult to see what you get hit by with the Sanctum rewards. So let's see here. I think a lot of the stuff got more buried, but here we have this day here. The mechanic takes you how to dodge, and this is pretty much like the day where it depends on what build you're playing, right? There's certain builds that I feel like are just not really viable. So this guy is just ready. I don't even know what this video is of, but basically certain builds in the Sanctum are just not viable because it is near impossible to get hit. So if you play melee, near impossible to not to get hit. So if you play melee or something, or like if you're playing Venom Giant and you're trying to Whirling Blades on top of the boss, you are probably not going to be able to do the Sanctum or complete it. You will have 0 damage uptime because you're forced to like run away the whole time in order to dodge stuff. And this is just a horrible, horrible mechanic that I don't really know what they could actually do. One of the solutions is probably to increase the amount of resolve you have to an absurd level so that you pretty much trivialize the whole resolve mechanic. And I do think that's probably the better suggestion right now, is to make it a lot less punishing, because having everyone in the league just play Seismic Trap or Explosive Arrow or Artillery Ballista is not the real solution, right? You can't just force people to play a certain build. I mean, you can. I mean, people do that with like Deep Delve, but this is a fundamental league mechanic that we want to actually participate in, and it just feels bad that people have to re-roll off builds because they were led to believe by Chris during their league start announcement that melee would be perfectly fine because they get less loss of their resolve. Now, that's just perfectly untrue, because I did a Sanctum, I Whirling Blades to the boss, and I lost 100 plus resolve. Now, I don't know if I got hit by some shotgunning thing, but I don't really know. It's just not good. Now, the current meta is for Dot and Totem builds, which has led to the rise of Explosive Arrow on PoE Ninja. I think most people did not expect Explosive Arrow to be the second most played skill, and that really goes to show you how bad the Sanctum is for certain builds. Now, this person says, I'm usually pretty positive about this game, but every time I lose resolve to an attack that wouldn't have even been on my half of the screen, if I was playing minions or totems, I have the urge to uninstall. And it says, holy shit, fuck this resolve mechanic. We've never had a mechanic favor some archetypes so much more than others. Has skews before Legion, Ultimate, and Ritual, but holy shit, they're like 6-4s or maybe 7-3s. This is an actual for realsies 9-1. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. This league mechanic is just a dead on arrival for certain builds, and I do think that they can try to fix it a little bit, but the core problem remains that PoE's combat is really, really bad if you're trying to make it like an Elden Ring affair where you're trying to dodge everything. PoE is not Elden Ring, it is an ARPG that was popular because of its frantic combat and ability to have the most absurd scenarios appear in maps. Now, overall, it does sound like I'm complaining about the league mechanic a lot, but I actually really enjoyed it. Forbidden Sanctum, I have been doing it a lot, mainly because I want the Sanctified Relic. But this doesn't even touch upon the other point, which is this mechanic will never work on softcore trade because there's no endgame scaling potential for the reward. So what we get on day 1 or day 2 is not going to be that much different than the later days unless we get some really overpowered relics that helps us out on our run. But mapping is just too profitable. It's just really hard to beat it, but we will be forced to go into it because of Sanctified Relic. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing. Is it a good thing that we're forcing people to do the league mechanics so that they need to get this guaranteed boosted player power? Because there's no other league mechanic that gives you this insane of a boosted character power that you're forced to do. Now, Resolve should probably definitely be toned back. We shouldn't be getting auto attack for huge amounts of Resolve. And the hit feedback is just really bad in general. I don't really know what they can do. Maybe they can make the telegraphs more obvious, but right now kind of hard to really even see what's going on, especially with the amount of visual clutter in PoE. Now, league mechanic is a great idea. I do think that this idea had a lot of complexity to it. It probably needed a little bit more testing, a little bit more tuning of the number of boos and afflictions you actually get, but we will see what happens in the coming days. I'm assuming that they're going to buff the rewards wildly for the last room and maybe make it a little bit better in that sense, and probably make it so that there's a lot more boons instead of affliction, so not every single pathway that you have is literally blocked by an affliction. And we may just be wildly incorrect, and that the relics that we get later on does trivialize everything, so we don't even need to think about it. And this is a very early take, but I do not like how they actually designed it, but I do have a lot of fun with the mechanic, and I wish that they can change it a little bit better. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors and divines than me, and see you next time. Bye.